All right, we'll take it back from the top then. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. وبعد. We begin in the name of Allah Azza wa Jal by asking Him to send peace and blessings upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and upon his family, his companions, his wives, and indeed upon all of the believers until the Day of Judgment. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala finds all of you in the strongest of Iman and in the pursuit of personal spiritual transformation, and of course in the confines of your home, safe and healthy. Especially during this time. You know, it's amazing to think that already 2 weeks has passed, that already we've got, you know, mashallah, 2 weeks of Ramadan are gone, and we're now literally, you know, just a few weeks away from Eid, right? So this is just an amazing, it's an amazing time for all of us, and also a time for a lot of spiritual growth and reflection. And that's what, inshallah, as you know, we've been covering for the last few weeks. And we will continue to cover. And my goal with all of this is to make sure this isn't the end all be all, right? So we've got this process of personal transformation is just that. It is a process. It is not something where we get a degree at the end of it. You're not going to get a certificate. Alhamdulillah, you're certified envy-free, right? You're certified jealousy-free. It doesn't work that way. This is a struggle, as a scholar has said, it's a lifetime struggle. It's a lifetime commitment. And there's a lot of good in that, right? Because it forces us to do the things we need to do without falling back into old habits, right? And that's really the key here. So a lot of what we've been doing over the last 2 weeks, just even through our reflections, even through our journaling, is to identify those bad habits, right? Once we identify those triggers and those habits, then we can start to rectify it. We can start going into areas of, all right, I know this is a trigger for XYZ. I'm not going to engage in this. I know when I put myself in this situation, these bad things tend to happen. I know when I put myself in this place, these things tend to happen, right? The reality is that none of us is, you know, we're not going to be pristine in our Iman at all times. And that's not what Allah demands of us, right? We're human beings. I shared in one of our previous sessions that the Prophet ﷺ said, "Kul ibn Adam khatta' wa khayrul khatta'in at-tawwabun." That all of the children of Adam are sinners. They all make mistakes, right? But the best of those who commit these mistakes or fall into sin are the tawwabun. They are the ones who continuously ask for repentance. And inshallah, in next week's class, we're going to hopefully we can get to it. We're going to discuss some of the practices of our sages, of the pious predecessors that they put into practice in their everyday lives, so to help along this transformation process. And I just want to make one last note about that. I know, and again, I'm not going to say anything about you all. I know when I started reading this book, right? When I started reading this years ago, and then when I started reflecting upon it, what I was expecting was there to be a regimen. I was expecting there to be read this much adhkar, do this much dhikr, do this many salah, read Surah Waqi'ah and Surah Rahman, and so all these things a certain number of times, and that's how you'll rid yourself of your diseases, right? And instead I found the exact opposite. Not that those things aren't there, and inshallah we'll go into some of those spiritual practices, but what I found was that the transformative aspect of this deen has little to do with that and everything to do about ourselves, right? About coming to terms with who we are as individuals, not who we are as mankind, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala already tells us that in the Quran, that these are mankind's virtues and vices, right? Now it's up to me to personalize it. And like I said, of the 25 some odd diseases that are there, inshallah, none of us are, you know, fall into all 25 of them, right? But there are ones that will resonate with us stronger than others, more than others. And I think, inshallah, you'll find today's session, and again, maybe you won't, I know I did, right? And I know I will, as we go through the reflections today. When we cover anger and its and its sisters, or its brothers, its siblings, if you will, I think, you know, that may hit home for some of us harder than maybe envy did, or jealousy, or arrogance did, or miserliness, or greed, or what have you. So without any further ado, I just wanted to kind of give that as an introduction, especially for those that may be new to the course. I do encourage you to listen to sessions 1 and 2 if you're able to. It's on the MakeSpace YouTube page and on the Facebook page, I believe. And so, inshallah, you know, there'll be something of benefit that you'll be able to take from it, and really not from anything that I've said, really more from the introspection and the reflection that that we oftentimes don't take the time to do. So let's go ahead and get started with today's session. I'm going to see if I'm technologically advanced enough to get this to work properly. To be fair, I'm using a laptop that's not mine. So it works? Perfect. All right. Let's go ahead and go into present. All right, so you guys recall, 1 second here. Oops. Yeah, so this is just a quick recap, inshallah, of what we covered last week. As you recall, we covered envy, its causes and its treatments, and also a corollary to envy was displeasure with divine decree. Right? We talked about that. We talked about how to navigate life, the 4 responses. Inshallah, hopefully you remember those responses, but we find ourselves either in blessing or in tribulation, or we find ourselves in obedience or disobedience. Every stage in our life, at every moment in our life, one of these 4 things is happening to us, right? So then how do we respond to a blessing? With shukr. How do we respond to a trial or tribulation? With sabr. How do we respond to a act of obedience? Again, with shukr, with thankfulness, gratefulness. And how do we respond to disobedience? With tawbah, right? So those are just things about how to navigate our lives and what we're doing there. And then finally, you know, I didn't introduce it, I shouldn't say that. I borrowed and adopted from corporate America a coaching model that's used called the GROW model. And hopefully, you know, you saw that there's some benefit in that. To, you know, it's something that we usually use in corporate to coach our direct reports and people that work for us. But you can adopt it in a way to apply it to yourself, coaching yourself, your nafs. Right? How do I coach myself? So inshallah, that was just one aspect that we did. And we covered the du'as, protection from evil and envy, the evil eye and envy. And then the most often recited dua of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who would say this in jalsa, he would say this before his salam and salah, he would say this in sajda, he would say it in every moment, Ya muqallibul qulub thabbit qalbi ala deen. Oh, you who control my hearts, make my heart steadfast on this deen. So what diseases are we going to cover today? This one I had to group, you know, the book goes into different areas and aspects, and what I did was I actually grouped the ones that I felt were most kind of correlated together. So hatred, iniquity, negative thoughts, anger, rancor, and derision, right? And we'll go into each of these, maybe at a high level, not to get too in detail, but hopefully beginning to see how we can recognize when this is happening, right? And that's really the key here, inshallah. And I grouped them here for a reason. And I call it anger and its siblings. I've been taking a grammar class, and so there's in grammar, in Arabic grammar, there's a category called kana wa akhawatuha. It's like the kana is this grammar. It's a grammar terminology in Arabic that's used, and its sisters, right? So I was like, oh, well, we can call the same thing here, except I'll call it siblings, because really anger doesn't know male or female, right? It can apply to all of us. And this is the order I'm going to take us through in today's session. We're going to start off talking about negative thoughts, right? Because oftentimes we may not recognize it, but this is where that anger actually starts to manifest, right? It starts at the thinking level. Before it's, you know, before you punch somebody in the face or you exert your anger in some way, right? There's a deep-seated thought there. How do we recognize that this is a negative thought about an individual? We'll go into derision, which is basically making fun of others or mocking them. Iniquity, which is harming other people. Hatred, which is holding something in your heart against others. And then rancor, which is, you know, committing treachery against others. And all of this is part of anger, right? So we will cover anger at the end of this. And I was debating how best to go and address these issues, because these are deep and heavy topics. This is not, you know, each one of these topics is a session in and of itself. But again, this 4-week course is all about it. It's a primer, right? And the idea, hopefully, inshallah ta'ala, is that you're able to go and immerse yourself in the text, immerse yourself in understanding what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants of you as an individual and how it applies. That's really the point here, inshallah. So all of this is part of anger, and at the end we'll cover anger at a maybe a little bit deeper of a level. Keep in mind, these are all different, in my estimation. Again, this is not from Sheikh Hamza or from Imam Maulud. This is just in my estimation. These are all kind of manifestations that we see where anger can be part of that equation. So let's begin, shall we? Negative thoughts. In Arabic, this is oftentimes, this is known as su'adhan, right? Su'adhan, having a bad opinion of others. And specifically, they mention it's a bad opinion of others without cause, right? So he makes a distinction in the book saying that there are people who will go out and publicly sin and have no qualms about publicly sinning or deriding others or being really bad people, right? And he's like, those are people that have essentially made their own bed, right? If other people have judgments against them, it's because of what they're publicly displaying and the arrogance that they're displaying with. This is something a little bit different, however. This is having a bad opinion of others without just cause. And, what do we base this opinion on? Oftentimes, we're basing these judgments of people based on what we've heard other people say about them, right? So we may not have had an interaction, we may have very limited interaction with them, but now we're basing it on what other people have said, right? And we're letting that kind of cloud our judgment of this individual, right? We could also be forming opinions based on bad appearances, right? A person may not look up to snuff. They may not look like, they're all that practicing, or they may not look like they have this or that thing. But I remind you again of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, in which he talked about a man whose hair was disheveled and his clothes were completely tattered and he was covered in dust and he was madfu'un bil abwab. He was pushed away from the doors. People in society did not want anything to do with him, right? But the Prophet ﷺ said, appearances, he appeared like a lowly figure. But if he were to raise his hands in dua and ask Allah for something, Allah would grant it to him immediately. So his rank before others was low, but his rank with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was very high, right? And that's why appearances can be deceiving, right? And we have to recognize that. So we fall into this probably more than we want to admit that we do. Let's be real, right? I may have opinions about people that I've made in my mind and it may be based on my experiences. To be fair, it may be based on my own experiences with them or with their family or with their others or with others that are like them, but we're letting that make a specific judgment about this individual. And it's not a judgment that you're calling them to account for something. It's simply harboring a bad opinion. It's interesting that the scholars actually mention this about people of knowledge in particular. They say you should not have a bad opinion of about a person of knowledge, somebody who has really studied this deen. And by the way, the scholars themselves, if you read their writings, they're going back and forth and off on one another, right? It was, they used to say about, Allahu Alam, I don't remember if it was about Ibn Taymiyyah or not, that the sword of a martyr and the pen of Ibn Taymiyyah was the same thing, right? Like he could cut people down with the way that he wrote about them, but he wasn't doing it to them. He was oftentimes talking about their specific opinions on matters, right? It wasn't a personal assault, if you would. And so in the chapter, it's interesting because it talks about having a bad opinion of the people of knowledge, but you could actually extrapolate this into having a bad opinion about others, period, right? And he mentions this because a person may be in a situation right now where they're not very well venerated or honored, but the reality is they could make tawbah. And after making that repentance, they could be Jannah bound. They could be a person on the way to paradise. And now you've started harboring a bad opinion about somebody who's close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? One of the other things to just note here is having a good opinion of Allah and others is a virtuous deed. The Prophet ﷺ specifically said that a servant will find Allah in the way that he thinks about him. In other words, if he believes Allah to be merciful, he will find Allah's mercy. If he believes Allah to be other than that, he will find other than that, right? So this is, in my opinion, Allahu Alam, this is really important because it forces us to start, again, thinking about things differently, right? Thinking about others differently, thinking about the creation of Allah differently, and thinking about Allah differently as well, in a positive way. So what are some of the practical manifestations of this? Well, number one, reality is we treat people as we see them in our minds. Right? I actually was part of I did this, it was a leadership workshop through work about 6-7 months ago. And it was about unknown biases that all of us possess. And so as people are going through this workshop, right, we're confronting the fact that we approach people with biases we didn't know we had. Right? So it's one thing to know that you have a bias. It's another thing to not realize that you actually have this. And what we found through this exercise was that if we put people in certain buckets, whether it's employees, whether it's family members, whether it's community members, whether it's siblings, if we put people in certain buckets, we will start treating them the way that we've put them in our minds. If we think that they are young and immature, we will treat them as if they are young and immature. Right? If we think that they just can't get their life together, then we will start treating them as if they haven't got their life together. Right? That's how we approach things. That mentally, that's just how human beings do. And the Prophet ﷺ, he showed us a different approach, which was applying 70 excuses to your brother or sister. Now, what does that mean? That means that when they do something wrong or harmful, make an excuse. Hey, maybe they were having a bad day. Maybe they didn't really mean to say that. Maybe they weren't trying to be that hurtful to me. They were just trying to state something factually, right? I mean, yeah, I just had an interesting experience yesterday. I watched Little Women with the family, right? And there's a scene in there which one of the individuals is criticizing an author or a writer. And he's being honest in his criticism. He's saying, no, I think this is garbage. I think you're a very talented writer, but I don't think this is good writing. Right? And she takes a massive amount of offense to that and just storms off. And, we were talking about it as a family later. We're like, this poor person was just trying to give honest feedback. That's what people want. They say they want honest feedback, but sometimes when they get the honest feedback, they don't really want it anymore, right? It's too hard to bear. And this class, brothers and sisters, is about honest feedback with ourselves, right? It's about being critical with ourselves, not making 70 excuses for ourselves, but making 70 excuses for others, right? Maybe they've had a bad day. Just another point here, negative energy in general begins to weigh down on us. That's the reality. Is when we start harboring these negative emotions and these negative tendencies and these negative thoughts, we're the one that are suffering. It's not others. They oftentimes don't even know we're thinking about them that way. But it's us that it starts to weigh heavily on. It is okay to have doubts about individuals. Right? When you meet somebody, you can't be super trusting every single time that you meet somebody new, right? But you should come from a good place. And then as some of the scholars say, maybe, through your interactions with them, you begin to see, okay, this is a trustworthy person. I can take them into my life and trust them. Don't start off immediately, hey, this person is probably going to steal from me and cheat me out and all this other stuff. And then I have a final note here. Social media trolls and haters, they thrive on this stuff, man. They thrive on trying to put a bad opinion of any and everybody out there. We have got to guard ourselves against that. There are people that are looking for every scholar to slip, for every person to make a mistake, and for it to be displayed publicly and put out there, right? There is a time and a place and a forum for those things to come to light. Don't get me wrong, right? But oftentimes, if you look at what goes completely, really goes viral, right? When you think about what goes viral, oftentimes it's the bad stuff. It's not the good stuff that's going viral, right? It's all the negativity that's out there. So what's the treatment for this?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Chat. Someone says the PowerPoint says do not apply the 70 excuses, but the Sheikh says we should.
Oh, the practical manifestation, Jazakumullah khair. The practical manifestation of a negative thought is when you do not apply the 70 excuses. So I should have made that more clear. So if you are not applying those 70 excuses, then that means that you may be leaning towards having negative thoughts. And then finally, the treatment is to mind shift to positive thoughts, right? So that same individual that you feel is, not a very caring or giving person, have it from a different perspective, that maybe they need help. Maybe they are more giving. Maybe they have a lesser capacity to give or to be more generous than you, right? So start shifting your mind shift into positivity and looking at people not through su'ad-dhan, which is negative opinion of others, but husnud-dhan, positive opinion of others, right? Making, again, not easy, but much of this book is about mind shifts and how do we make those mind shifts, right, with individuals. All right, let's talk derision. And I thought nobody better to explain it than Nelson, right, from The Simpsons. All right, what is the definition of derision, first of all, right? I read this word and I was like, man, again, this is one of those instances where Sheikh Hamza's English, it surpasses the Arabic that we have. Derision, we actually have a really simple definition. It's just ridiculing others. It's mocking or making fun of them at their expense. And, we see this, oftentimes bully culture is all about this. It's all about making fun of others, putting others in their quote unquote in their place, or really thriving off of that. And there's lots of practical manifestations. The reality is sometimes we take this too lightly. We do it in the context of being funny or having fun with somebody. Oh, I'm just poking fun at them. Do we know that poking fun at them is not going to in some way harm them or hurt their self-esteem or put them in a low place, right? Have we done that analysis? Have we actually had that conversation with the person, right? It may be fine to do things in jest, but we should always make sure that that jest is cleared with the individual who's the object that we're making, or maybe not make them the object, right? This is really important. We have more of a tendency to do this than we think about. And Ali ibn Abi Talib once said, do not belittle anyone, for he or she here may be a friend of God, right? That's the reality. Again, I talked about this just a little bit ago. They may be a sinner today that could make Tawbah tomorrow, that could be at the gates of Jannah the next day, right? I mean, that's how quickly it can come. That repentance, once that repentance is accepted, they are on the path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Once that repentance is accepted. And Ali ibn Abi Talib was, again, wise beyond his years, saying, don't belittle anyone. Don't make fun of them, because the reality is once you do, you don't know if that person could be a friend of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you're making fun of. And then how would that make you feel, right? So we have to guard ourselves against doing things or saying things, even as a joke, that could be offensive to others. And if we look at the treatment, where does derision come from? It's really interesting. This chapter, they talked about how the cures for this are the same ones for arrogance that we talked about 2 weeks ago, right? That recognizing that that arrogance, the source of arrogance over others, is temporary. We could be arrogant with others because of our wealth, our health, our looks, our lineage, our abilities, our skills, our degrees, our whatever you put. All of those things, brothers and sisters, are completely temporary. They can be taken away. They can be taken away at any time, right? How many people, subhanAllah, just this week, just yesterday, 2 days ago, the new unemployment reports came out, right? 14.7% of Americans are unemployed right now in this country, or filing for unemployment in this country. What's amazing about that is 8 weeks ago, it was less than 3%. So you're talking about a 5x incline in the unemployment in just 8 weeks. Brothers and sisters, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in control. There are people who had jobs that don't have jobs anymore. There are people who had wealth that don't have wealth anymore because the stock market has crashed, right? Or whatever. There are real, all these things that we arrogate ourselves over, that we may make fun of others with, are things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can take away from us. So we have to recognize that God is all powerful and can debase you while lifting others at the same time, right? He can make you low and make others high. He can elevate them and he can humiliate you. That's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala works. And in the same way, he can elevate you and also humiliate others. He is ultimately in control. And one of the best ways to really, for me personally, where this came to light was when I invested and I'm still investing actually in learning and applying the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You see in his life, and I think I shared with you all in last week's class about how many difficulties he had. You know, one of my teachers once said there was not a year, perhaps not even a month, that went by after his prophethood came to him that he didn't have some type of personal tragedy that afflicted him, that he had to deal with and he had to overcome. Right? I mean, that's real talk there, brothers and sisters. This is a man who really, and yet in spite of all of that, he didn't mock or ridicule others. He wasn't there to try and bring them down. He was there to try and uplift, right? And he is the pinnacle example of gratefulness and honoring others, right? Even though you could argue that life didn't honor him, at least not for 20 some odd years, right? But then eventually, through that dignity, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, dignified him, right? So it's important to recognize that. And then finally, one of the treatments that the scholars mentioned here is, again, mind shift. No, right? I love when they start off with no, something, 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 right? It's almost like put yourself in that mindset to know that those who mock others in this life will be mocked in the next life, right? That's a really harsh lesson for us to recognize that, you know, we may be debasing others here. And it may start off with just negative thoughts and, oh, we're making fun of them. And, oh, you know, it's all in good jest because we're all in the crowd together and everybody's laughing. Haha, it's hilarious, right? You don't want to be the one being laughed at in the next life. Keep that in mind, right? So we have to hold others with a good opinion and not ridicule them. All right, let's talk about iniquity. All right, this is that word bughd, as is the translation of that. What is it? Iniquity is harming others without just cause, right? Harming others without just cause. Again, this is now, we've moved a little bit beyond negative thoughts. We've even moved beyond ridiculing others. Now we're actually looking to harm others, okay? Transgressing on the rights of others for any context or any pretense is not allowed. It's not something we should be doing. And yet people do this all the time. And in fact, you know, we'll talk a little bit about its practical manifestations, but we may be doing this without realizing that we're doing it. Again, that's the thing with these spiritual diseases is they may consume us from within without us realizing we're being consumed by them, right? And here, what does it mean to harm others? Well, sometimes when we think harm, we just think physical harm. But you could be harming others emotionally. You could be harming others' reputations. You could be harming others in a number of different ways that are not just physical, right? That's what we have to start guarding ourselves against. And the treatment for this is to seek the pleasure of Allah alone, not yourself and not others. Sometimes people will do things for others. You know, they'll harm others because they want to gain favor with somebody else. So they'll put somebody else down because that elevates them in the eyes of another person. And yet the scholars here say, no, that's wrong. What does that fall into? Riya, what we talked about in the first class. Doing things for the sake of other people and not for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we're going to do it for Allah and Allah alone, He's not going to want us to debase or harm others. So we should not be transgressing on their rights. The Prophet ﷺ also said, when this starts to happen, when you start to hear it or see it manifesting, remember death often. Literally, actually, the word that he used here in Arabic, hadim al-ladhat, the destroyer of pleasures. The destroyer of pleasures. What is the destroyer of pleasures? Death, right? People, you bring up death in a conversation. I actually did this once with a colleague. I don't recommend it, but I remember it was, you know, one of my days I was feeling somewhat existential, right? And I was like, hey man, did you ever think about what happens after death? And literally, their face just went completely white. Like, why would you bring that up? Why would you want to even discuss this? This is something I don't want to think about, right? And it's true. We're trained in a way to think that we're going to live forever, right? We're trained in a way to think that we have false hopes, which is actually another disease, which we may or may not get to. But, you know, it's, you know, as if death is something far away. And yet the Prophet ﷺ, he's reminding us that remember death often. Remember it often. because it will remind you about what's real. When I first, there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that the one who remembers death 20 times a day, 20 times a day, is counted amongst the martyrs. And I remember I first heard this when I was studying with Dr. Sherman Jackson at the Alim program in Michigan, in 2000. And I first heard this, and there was one brother, man, mashallah, mashallah, he took it to heart. I'm saying that my man on his walk, every half hour, set an alarm. So 10 hours in the day, every half hour, he would remember death. That's how seriously he took this. I mean, you and I read hadith and we hear them all the time. This is a brother who personalized that. He really took it. Like, you know what? If I want to be counted amongst the martyrs, I want to follow this hadith of the Prophet. How do we do that? And then let's talk a little bit about the practical manifestations of bughd, right? Sometimes we may trample on others in order to, quote unquote, get our way, get ahead, or prove a point. We have to be very careful about this, brothers and sisters. There is nothing in our religion that allows for us to trample on the rights of others, period. Full stop. Even in war, the Prophet ﷺ warned us against harming women and children, or the elderly, or the monastics, or the places of worship, or even, not even to cut down the trees that provided sustenance to others, not to poison the wells because it could bring harm, like undue harm to others. Why? Because the transgressing upon the rights of others is a grave sin, and we fall into it more often than not, possibly because we're just trying to prove a point. We're just trying to get ahead or get our way or prove somebody else wrong, right? But are we transgressing them? Are we harming them in a way that is going to really be problem? It's going to ultimately come back and harm us spiritually. And again, I mentioned here, it doesn't have to be physical harm. It could be a harm to a person's reputation, to their skills, to their jobs, to their relationships. Think about that for a moment. Really, have we caused that kind of harm to others? And it's usually, by the way, it's usually rooted in desire for power or love of this world. Hubb al-riyasa, right, which some of the scholars said is the root of all diseases, love of leadership or power, or hubb al-dunya, which some of the other scholars said is the root of all diseases, love of this world, right? Usually, when we're making our bed here in this world and we're not thinking about the hereafter, that's when these things tend to become more manifest, right? That's when these things really tend to become more manifest. And I was just reading actually in a tafsir book last night, the story of Sulaiman ibn Abdul Malik and one of the scholars that came to him, and he said, "How do you know that I hate death? Why would you think that he's asking this of the scholar, why do you think that I would hate death?" And the scholar responded, "Because you've made your bed in this world and you've left everything for the next world. In other words, you've planted, actually his exact line was, you've planted your gardens here and you've left the desert of the hereafter. You've left it a desert in the hereafter. You're not planting the gardens there. So why would you want to go from what you've built to what you've destroyed? Right? Nobody wants to do that. So why would you want death in that case?" Again, it's a stark lesson for us that power and love of this world and those types of desires, they can be a path towards spiritual maleficence. They can be a path towards spiritual degradation, right? That's what we have to make sure it's not in our hearts. And I think, subhanAllah, if you look at especially the Khulafa Rashidin, right, those early caliphs, these were people that the dunya did not have a hold in their hearts. It did not. They were able to accomplish what they accomplished because they were doing it for Allah's sake. And whether the power came to them or not, whether the fame came to them or not, they could care less. They wanted to be right with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They wanted to be right with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then finally, I have a note here. Ultimately, remember, guys, what goes around comes around. Right? I mean, that's like, you don't need an Islamic proverb for that, right? That's something we all know. We all grew up with. What goes around comes around. How you treat others, you will be treated. That's just, and I've lived long enough in life now to know that, right? When you're in your 20s, when you're a teenager in your 20s, you kind of like, yeah, okay, whatever, right? Now once you get my age, once you get all this white in your beard, right? What goes around comes around. The way I have treated others is the way that they are treating me today. The way others have been treated, that's what happens, right? So we just have to remember that at all times. All right, favorite time of the day. right? So it was going to be a lot to soak in everything related to anger, so I wanted to break it up. And here's what I want you to do, inshallah, for the next, let's say the next 5 minutes or so. We're going to have some questions to answer about ourselves. Number one, when do my negative thoughts come out? Whether it's towards others or I have here towards myself. We are not immune from the negative thoughts, right? We have to recognize this. We talked a little bit about self-esteem last time, but we could be just as prone to negative thinking about ourselves. And is that really fair based on what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me in this world, right? So when do those negative thoughts come? That's the first question. Two, do I look down on others, whether in my heart or verbally? This is a serious question, guys. This, for me, when I did this exercise a few years ago, was the hardest thing for me to come to terms with. The fact that I may not be verbalizing it, but in my heart, I knew there were people I was looking down on, or there were people that I had a bad opinion of. So if you know this and you're real with yourself, I want you to write down their names. This is important, really important. I need you to call it out for yourself. Inshallah, we'll go through today and you'll know what to do with those names once you've called them out. But for right now, I need you to write down the name. And if you know the cause for why that bad opinion is there, right, write that down as well. And then the third question is, do I treat these people unfairly? Think about the specific interactions with the people that you're closest to or those that you push away, right? How am I interacting with them? Am I treating them unfairly in some way, shape, or form? And again, the focus here is to be real with yourself, not to just give yourself general platitudes and, oh, mashallah, I don't have any of that, right? Let's go deep within ourselves. All right, let's take 5 minutes, inshallah, and do that. I will be doing that with you because, frankly, I need to. So, bismillah.
you guys. I think we could just manage this. So I don't think
Inshallah, we'll wrap up in just a minute or so. And please keep note of where you are. You can always continue afterward, inshallah. All right, everybody. Bismillah. Alhamdulillah. Wa salatu wa salam ala rasulullah. We'll, inshallah, continue. And again, just to reiterate, this is not meant to be the end all be all. And hopefully what you've started today is just some notes from how you're going to start approaching some of these things in the future, inshallah. I'll just share with you one insight that I had as I was writing here, was that I noticed that my negative thoughts tend to come to me after somebody's hurt me, or if they've shirked on some type of responsibility. Then I can see myself start to spiral in my head around like, oh, well, they did this because they're like this and they're like this, and like all of a sudden now there's a whole chain of events that start in my mind. So that's just one insight I had as I was writing this. So, you know, I think it's important for us to recognize what some of those triggers might be, and then work off of, you know, how do we correct some of those triggers. So that's just one thing to note. And, you know, that last question, you know, everybody's going to answer that different, right? What is your definition of being unfair towards others? Is it just having a negative opinion of them? Is it actually treating them or taking some rights away from them, or wishing that they were, you know, being envious, wishing that their gift, whatever it is that Allah has given, is taken away, right? It could be any of these things. So But interestingly enough, I put on here, right, as I was doing this, sometimes it's the people closest to you that you take for granted, right? It's not the ones that are far away or, these ideals from other places. It's the ones that you're interacting with. So just keep that in mind oftentimes as we go through this. All right, let's continue with those different manifestations of anger. And we're hitting kind of the extreme end. So, we went from thoughts to ridicule to transgression. Now we're getting into hatred, bughd, and rancor, ghill. Okay? Bughd or hatred is defined as that. I mean, I think people generally know what hatred is, but it's really confined to one's heart, right? Like they just consumed on the inside with this hatred for this individual. Rancor is extreme anger, right? It's to the point that one wishes harm or treachery upon the other person. So it's not just that you hate them, it's that you really want to hurt them, right? And again, that hurt doesn't have to be a physical hurt. It could be a mental hurt. You could wish them to become incapacitated in some way, right? Or have some type of skill taken away from them, or whatever it is, right? That's the extreme. The anger kind of manifests in that way. The scholar said that this is a problem. This is not something that is to be taken lightly by any means. But interestingly, they said that the way in which you can overcome your hatred or your ghill, your rancor that you hold towards others, right? And again, usually it's not some, a president or leader somewhere. It could be, right? Usually it's a lot closer to home. Right? It's a lot closer to people that we interact with on a daily basis. Show goodwill towards the object of hatred. I thought this was really powerful when I first heard this, when I first read this. I was like, man, how do you do that? Right? The person that you hate, showing goodwill to them, that's why it's a treatment, brothers and sisters. This is not meant to be easy by any stretch of the imagination. This is meant to be difficult. This is meant to be a struggle, right? It is a struggle to try and do something for others when you know that they've hurt you or that you have this animosity in your heart against them, right? That's why the scholars are saying you have to work against what your desire is. Your desire may be to bring them down. You've actually got to go and do something to bring them up. That's how you're going to start fighting against your nafs, right? So you have to be very intentional about this. It's not going to happen by default. And in fact, you're going to hate it when it first happens, most likely, right? It's going to be really difficult to do. But you guys recall that story of the man who forgave people every single night? You notice he didn't just forget generalities of human beings. What did he say? I forgive the individual that has hurt me the most that day. That's who I forgive. And I'm not going to hold it against them on the day of judgment. Why? Because I anticipate Allah is going to forgive me because of that. So he had something bigger in mind. A man came to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he said, Ya Rasulullah, I give to my family, but they reject me. I'm kind to them, but they're unkind to me. In other words, I'm doing what I can for them. I really go out of my way and they just push me to the side. Or they just don't want to hear anything I have to do with it. What shall I do? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam responded and he said, continue to do as you are doing that, because as long as you are doing that, Allah and his angels are with you. I mean, subhanAllah, imagine that for a moment. What's he telling him? He's telling him, I know it's hard for you to be kind to people that are unkind to you, especially your relatives. I know that's hard. But just think about this. God and his angels are with you. That's what you should be worried about. Is God with me in doing this? I'm okay. Even after Taif, the Prophet ﷺ, one of the hardest days of his life, the dua that he made, oh Allah, I complain to you of my weakness, of my insignificance before man, of my qillat hilati. I don't even have a plan here. He's completely ashku ilayya. He's saying, I'm just spent. I'm just spent. But then he says, as long as you are not unhappy with me, la ubal, I don't care. Right? What is he doing? He's saying, as difficult as this moment is for me, I'm not worried about it as long as you're happy with it, as long as you are pleased with it. Right? So that's what we have to, that's the mind shift we have to take here. You make dua. This is, again, this will be inshallah on our plan for this week. And I had everybody on the plan for last week to make dua, person that you're envious against. Make dua for Allah to erase any ill will towards others. And in specific, we are fortunate. There's a dua in the Quran specifically about this, right? In which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that those are the ones who say, رَبَّنَا لا تجعل ربنا اغفر لنا ولإخواننا الذين سبقونا بالإيمان ولا تجعل في قلوبنا غلا للذين آمنوا. He said, "O our Lord, forgive us and our brothers who were there before us in faith, and the people who have passed away before us, and do not put in our hearts any ill feelings, any rancor, any ghill towards others, especially those who believe." Right? What are you asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? I love this dua. My kids know this dua because I say this after every prayer. I've made them say it. This is a specific dua about rancor in one's heart. That's why I love this, because it's from the Quran and it specifically says, لا تجعل في قلوبنا غلا للذين آمنوا. Like literally, from my heart, remove and erase any ghill towards others, any rancor or hatred towards others. How beautiful of a dua is that? And if you can live a life like that, subhanAllah, most of us can't. Let's be real, right? We're going to have issues, but it's okay. Because guess what happens in Jannah? We live a life free of that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised us that in Jannah, there will be no ghill, there will be no rancor, no hatred, you may have had an issue with a brother or a sister here or there. Don't worry about it. You're all in Jannah, everybody's good. It's all good in Jannah. You have nothing to worry about there. Right? It's all gone. This is just a struggle we have in this world, brothers and sisters. It's not going to carry over into the next. So we have to work extra hard to make sure that we are trying to do our best to rid ourselves of this ghil and this hatred. This is a beautiful dua. Encourage everybody to memorize it. Surah Hashr, Surah number 59, verse number 10. رَبَّنَا اغْفِرْ لَنَا وَلِإِخْوَانِنَا الَّذِينَ سَبَقُونَا بِالْإِيمَانِ وَلَا تَجْعَلْ فِي قُلُوبِنَا غِلًّا لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا رَبَّنَا إِنَّكَ رَءُوفٌ رَحِيمٌ. O our Lord, indeed you are O our Lord, forgive us and all those who have died before us in faith, and erase from our hearts any ill feelings towards others. Indeed you are most merciful and forgiving. It's a beautiful ayah, a beautiful dua. All right, so let's get to the meat. What's the meat? Anger. The longest chapter in the book is on anger. The longest chapter in the book. Imam al-Mawlud begins by describing it literally as the swelling ocean of all diseases. I thought, subhanAllah, and Shaykh Hamza actually mentions this really apt description, because that's what anger is like when it manifests. It's this swelling ocean. It just builds over time, and then eventually it consumes you. It consumes you. The Prophet ﷺ once told a man, when he asked him, what should I be most worried about? He responded and he said, the wrath and anger of God. How do I avoid it? He says, do not be angry or wrathful with others. We just talked about this. Having a good opinion of Allah, that's how we'll find Him. If we want to avoid Allah's wrath, we should not be wrathful and angry towards others. Right? We shouldn't have this type of animosity towards others. And the Prophet ﷺ told a man on 3 occasions at the same, or 3 times in the same occasion, La taghdab, la taghdab, la taghdab. Do not be consumed by your anger. Do not be consumed by your anger. Do not be consumed by your anger. Right? Do not be angry. Now, I want to say something about anger because I think it's oftentimes misunderstood. Anger can be and should be, in fact, a positive motivator for change. If we see injustice in the world around us, that should make us angry. We should be upset by that, right? But it should be a motivator for us to do something beneficial and not instead to get consumed and become, consumed with that anger and just become hateful and angry people. The Prophet ﷺ, that was not from his sunnah. It is not from his sunnah to walk around and be angry and hatred towards others. And guess what? Of everyone that's ever lived, he had that right. He had that right. He had people trying to assassinate him. He had people who were trying to undo everything he did, making fun of him, making fun of his family, pushing him out. All this other stuff was happening to him. He had every right to get angry, and yet he didn't. that was not his sunnah, right? We have to recognize that. So it is an emotion. And I think, one thing I think that's really interesting about it is how oftentimes we think about ourselves when we're angry. And I'd like to paint a picture here. This is what most of us think we look like when we're angry, right? We look like the guy angry, the emotion of anger from inside out. We're this cute little, with this little red monster looking thing that's just, it's over the top sometimes, but it's kind of cute, right? That's what we're thinking, that's what inside we feel like we are. To the person on the outside that we're exhibiting anger towards, we look a lot more like this. That's what we have to recognize, right? This self-image sometimes, and oh yeah, okay, yeah, I lose my temper sometimes. Yeah, I go off sometimes. We may think we look kind of cute and fuzzy, right? But to the person that is the object of our anger, whether it's our parents, our loved ones, our siblings, our children, our grandchildren, whoever it is, that's the object of the anger, we look a lot more like the guy on the right. And in fact, the Prophet ﷺ even mentioned this, about how a person, when they get consumed by anger, they turn red. He says they look like shaitan. They have that look of shaitan, kind of just being consumed by this. So we have to recognize it, that although we may think of ourselves a certain way when we're angry, the person receiving that anger is thinking of us very different. All right, so what do we do? How do we know this? What are some of the practical manifestations of anger? Obviously, this is difficult to put into words, I think, because a lot of us know when it's happening. For us individually, it may be different for every single person here, right? So losing one's temper at others, usually those who are closest to us, that losing of temper is where anger comes out, right? And again, we'll see this, as parents, we see it all the time in ourselves when it comes to our kids, right? Sometimes we have to recognize that it's manifested because we're coming from a place of negativity in life. Whether it's towards life, it's towards people, we're just angry. We feel like we were dealt a raw deal. We got a bad hand. And because of that, I'm just gonna be negative towards everybody and everything. And that's where I'm gonna, that's my, that's why it's manifest. It also, another practical manifestation is you lose the inhibition of what you are saying, doing, regardless of who you're speaking to, right? So you don't even care who the person is in front of you at that point. You're just angry and you're upset and you're spiraling and you just will say or do whatever. This is again, we have to recognize when this is happening within us. And one of the things that I'm gonna have us do is journal our personal causes of anger, right? Every single person here, there's triggers. There are triggers that will set us off. It could be people, it could be places, it could be, just things that we see or hear. These could all be triggers for us, and we need to document it, because it's only in documenting it, brothers and sisters, that we're going to be able to start to address it appropriately, right? We need to make sure that it's not going to overcome us. This is the tough part about anger, and this is why it's the longest chapter in the book, by the way. Right? There's a lot of different aspects of anger and of life that he mentions in this book, but it consumes many of us on lots of different levels, right? And it doesn't always have to be manifesting in a physical argument or a physical brawl of some kind. It could be something deep-seated within us that we know is there, even though we may not want to admit it. How do we rid ourselves of that? So let's talk a little bit about the treatments and the cures. Number one, we have to recognize, and the scholars talk about this in the book, they talk about recognizing the high, immense reward for forbearance and humility. All right, now, this is a really interesting word because the word in Arabic is hilm. And hilm, we translate it as forbearance. There's not really an English kind of equivalent for it. It's, one of the scholars I remember hearing this from, I think described it best. He said, when you have a right to be angry and you don't get angry, you don't manifest that anger, even though you have a right. So a lot of people get angry without any right. They just get angry because they're upset. They've had a bad day and all of a sudden they're gonna take it out on other people. That's why they get angry. I'm talking about here where a person has a right to get angry and they don't let that emotion come out. They don't let that, or they suppress it. They manage it to a point where that's not what's manifest. And I think it's great in the story of Zayd ibn Sana. So Zayd ibn Sana was one of the rabbis at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the Jewish tribes around Medina. And he had been reading in the books of the Torah and the Talmud and their scriptures at that time that there would be a prophet who would be coming. He knew that he had seen some of the signs. And so he looked into the books and he said, he heard about this man Muhammad who was preaching that there was that he was a prophet. And he went to go, he's like, you know what, I'm gonna go test it out. So he did some research and decided he was gonna walk up to the Prophet ﷺ when he was sitting there with his companions. So the Prophet ﷺ is sitting around with his companions. And he walks into the room, disregards everybody that's there, and says, which one of you is Muhammad? Right? Now, just the fact that he even said it like that, the companions now are on edge, right? And they said, this is him, this is he. And he goes up to him and he insults him to his face, right? Something to the effect of, your family owes me money and you and your fathers and your grandfathers, you all never paid people on time. Right now, that's, it's hard for us to kind of understand that, but in that culture at that time, to bring up somebody's father, grandfather, their lineage, especially their dead lineage, that was a line you did not cross, right? It was like, when I was growing up, all those yo mama jokes, right? It's equivalent to that. You just did not cross that line. And this man did, and he did in front of the companions. What do you think happened? Umar ibn Khattab stood up. Rasulullah, just give me the signal. I'll take care of him right here. I'll just whack him right here because of the way he's talking to you. The Prophet ﷺ says, Umar, be calm or be quiet. The man is asking for money. Go to my home and get him his money. All he says. He asked for money. He didn't do it in a nice way. He asked for money. Just go and get him his money. Umar is now walking with Zayd ibn Sana. And he says, do you know who I am? And Umar says, no, I have no idea who you are. He's probably thinking, I don't care. The way you treated, my messenger. The man says, my name is Zayd ibn Sana. Now, Zayd was a known quantity in Medina. So Umar stops and he says, you are the scholar amongst the Jews. He says, yes. He's like, what was that you just did? That was really insulting. In other words, you're a religious man. Why would you treat somebody like this? And Zayd ibn Sana says that I have looked into the books of the Torah and the Talmud and I saw the signs of the prophet who was to come. And I wanted to test your prophet because one of those signs was hilm. In other words, when he has a right to be angry, he forbears. And after testing your prophet, I testified that there is no God except Allah and that Muhammad is the messenger of God. And he becomes Muslim. And I shared the story with my students in the past, my Saturday school students. And I told them, I was like, what's amazing here is the man became Muslim not because of something the Prophet did, but because of something the Prophet didn't do. He didn't get angry. He didn't let it consume him. And his non-action was more powerful than any action he could have taken in this case. That's the amazing thing about the people of Allah, is in some ways, they're more known for what they didn't do, right? We had, last year, Sheikh Hamza wrote a really beautiful piece on his teacher, Murabat al-Hajj, rahmatullah alayh, who passed away in Mauritania. And he said, one of the things that you could never find in the presence of Murabat al-Hajj, and I verified this actually with one of my teachers, Sheikh Faisal, who has studied in his circle. He said, you would never hear him degrading or belittling other people. Never. In his presence, he would never harm anybody verbally or anything like that, right? And I think this is amazing. He's more well known for what he didn't do. He didn't do ghibah, he didn't do backbiting, he didn't do any of these things than all of the good things he may have done, right? That's what really it's so powerful about him. So again, here, forbearance, I like to think of it as it is the managing or the suppression of that anger when it's rightfully to be manifest. And the Prophet ﷺ, his own example was one of just letting go of one's ego. It's hard, guys. This is not easy stuff. But transformation was never meant to be easy, right? This real personal deep transformation is not meant to be easy. And we have to allow, we cannot allow others to manipulate our emotions. That's what anger does. When you think about it at a very real level, we're allowing others to dictate our emotions, right? We have to recognize that true power and might comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All right, so let me give you a few practical tips here. What did the Prophet ﷺ say? If you see this swelling ocean coming up in you, and again, number one, it's best if we write down the triggers and we start to recognize them, right? Now we know what we can hone in on. Hey, when I'm with so-and-so, I tend to get really angry, right? So in that case, what did the Prophet ﷺ say? He said, change your environment. If you're standing, sit down. If you're sitting, lay down. If you're laying down, stand up. Change your environment. If you need to leave the room, go and make wudu, right? Do something to change the situation. Remove yourself from the situation. And by the way, that's what many, therapists will tell you now too. If you feel that anger is going to overcome you, walk away. Right? Remove yourself from it. Don't say something in the heat of the moment that you're going to forget, right? And of course, recognize this from shaitan. So how do you get rid of shaitan? A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. You know, I've done this with my children before, where they've been really angry at something or somebody, and I've made them say "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim" 10 times, and they don't like saying it. And by the end of it, they're not sure why they're saying it anymore, right? So they're angry with me for making them said it, right? But like, I've now redirected their anger in a different way, right? There's a practical manifestation here. We just have to recognize. Now, I do want to focus on something on mind shift, and this is something I learned from Dr. Jackson, that, I mean, for me, it was mind altering, mind shifting. I don't know if it's going to have the same effect on all of you, but subhanAllah, the way he explained anger, I thought, through an example in particular, was so incredible. And I'll share with you the example. I get up in the morning. Let's go back to pre-corona, right? Pre-corona, we had a routine in the mornings. We would get the kids, you get up in the morning, get the kids ready, brush their teeth, get their clothes on, get downstairs, get their book bag together, get everything together, and then get on the way to school. So by 7:50, we're in the car and we're on our way to drop them off at school. So if I'm looking at my morning, what I want my child to get up. I want my child to brush their teeth, to put on their clothes, to get their stuff together, to get breakfast ready, by the time I come down, or by the time I'm ready to take them at 7:50, in my mind, all that has got to be done. Okay? That's my ideal. They get themselves up, they get themselves ready, reality is what? They're not getting up until I push them and shake them out of bed, right? I've got to force them into their clothes. The reality is they may not be, they may not want to get their own breakfast, or they may not want this, or their book bags all over the place. That's the reality that I'm dealing with in the mornings. So Dr. Jackson explained that anger comes when there's a disconnect between a person's ideal and their reality. So in the ideal, I want all these things to happen. When reality shows that those things are not happening, I start to get angry. And by 7:50, if those things have not been put in place, now my anger overcomes me. Now, why did he explain it this way? He said, what's the change? What's the difference here? What causes our anger is not reality. It's the ideals and the expectations that we've put upon ourselves or upon others. If we change our ideals to be more in line with reality, we will not get angry about the things that we can't control. Right? He's like, that's the reality here. So to me, I just found that a fascinating way of looking at anger. That wait, maybe it's more about my expectations. Maybe I need to reset my expectations or reset my ideals and start looking at it through that lens and looking at what's realistic here. That's what's going to actually help manage my anger. So it starts again with the mind shift, brothers and sisters. And that the Prophet ﷺ, he lived in realities and not in ideals. That's what's so fascinating. If he lived in ideals, I mean, subhanAllah, he would have been, probably would have been a king with all kinds of servants and everybody would listen to his every message. And that's not the ideal. He lived in a reality where none of that was happening. His own people were turning against him. But he taught us how best to live a dignified reality. That's what makes him Uswatun Hasana, the best of examples for us. It starts with that mind shift. Maybe let's curtail our expectations. He wanted good for his people. That's why he loved his people. He wanted them to follow his message, but he recognized some of them are just not going to. And I've got to concentrate on the ones that want to hear the message, right? Those are the ones I'm going to have on my side. All right, reflection time. I've already gone over about an hour and 15. So mashallah, for those of you that are still here, that have lasted or that are not angry with me, right? Mashallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you. We're gonna use a grow model. You guys recall this model from last time, right? And actually, let me see if all right. We'll end with something after that. So we'll do a little bit of reflection now, and then I've got just 2 quick slides, and we'll end after that, inshallah. But we're gonna use a grow model to address anger and its siblings, okay? The goal, how would you like to address your anger or its siblings as an issue? How would you like to address those issues? Are you able to recognize when and how anger, rancor, hatred, bad opinions manifest? Okay, that's number 1. Reality, what are you doing today to treat your anger? Are you making wudu? Are you not doing anything? Are you removing yourself from the situation? What triggers have you identified for that reality? Right? Again, this is going to take some deep reflection, guys. Options, what could you do? What are your choices? What do you think will be most effective or most likely to be consistent? We cannot boil the ocean here, right? Literally, if anger is a swelling ocean, we can't boil the whole thing. We've got to attack things that we can, right? What's realistic for me? It may not be realistic for me to remove myself from the situation, but it may be realistic for me to make wudu at that time. When I start to get angry and I start getting flustered, I'm going to go make wudu, right? Or I'm going to go pray 2 rakahs, or I'm going to just do something other than engage in that conversation or in that moment, right then and there. Just walk away. That may be the best thing to do at the moment. And then what's your way forward? What are you going to put into action this week, right? And in particular, I had you guys write down names earlier of people that we have bad opinions of. Will you make dua every sajda after every salah for the objects of your anger, for those people that you wrote down the names for? Right? That's going to be the task for this week. So let's take a few minutes now. Let's do that reflection, inshallah, and then I'll have some concluding marks for today. Bismillah. Assalamu alaikum. I just realized it's almost 1:30, so we'll go ahead and wrap up. Hopefully you can take down some of these questions. And I was just talking to Omar earlier today. For those that have registered for the class, maybe we'll figure out a way to get you the slides. If you feel like there's something beneficial in here, then we'll figure out how to get that to you, inshallah. But in the interim, let's at least jot down the questions. I think you guys generally know the model that we're working with and what we're trying to do, inshallah. So I'm gonna say just one last note, and then we'll turn it over. I think Omar mentioned there's some questions. I had a feeling the session on anger was gonna bring forth some questions. But one thing that I've been trying to do during the weeks is take other concepts or concepts that are out there and retrofit them for what we're going through in terms of personal transformation. I actually got this recently at work from our CEO. He came in and said he wanted everybody to put together a personal wellness plan. And to invest some time in doing that. And it was specifically around working from home and how that's changed the dynamics. But I took it and I adjusted it for us. Said, okay, what are some reflection questions? Well, we have to ask ourselves, how are we doing personally, right? What are the biggest challenges being at home during quarantine, right? That includes work, it includes family, it includes spouses, children, everything, right? What support do we need from our loved ones and our friends, right? So this is all about being real with ourselves. Like, hey, I can't do this all by myself. And I'm not meant to. That's the thing, right? The Prophet was the Prophet, but he also had all of his friends and companions around him, right? For a reason, and they each brought a different genius to the table. Are we taking the personal time we need for ourselves and our family, right? What are we doing for fun? Do we have time off baked in to reconnect with Allah, ourselves, our families? What support do we need? How would you define a successful or productive day? In this case, while staying at home or just in general, right? And what are your priorities in the next 30 to 90 days? Family, self, God, right? Are you having regular check-ins with others? What support do you need from them? And I had this picture up here because I thought it beautiful in terms of, this is a journey, right? None of us is gonna have this, we're not gonna figure this out tomorrow, right? We're not gonna figure out coronavirus for probably months, right? So we've got to figure out how do we adjust to our lives in this new normal. And frankly, I look at it, I don't think this is a bad thing. It's a time for us to really step back and reflect, something we probably haven't done a lot of. And Ramadan, what better time than Ramadan to do that? And then you can take the answers to those questions and actually start putting together a plan, right? And start to prioritize them. So the questions are actually pretty simple, right? But they're very profound. They require that type of deep reflection. So up until this point, a lot of our reflections have been around spiritual diseases. Well, we can start now that we know some of those triggers, we've documented them, we've got a game plan for some of them. Now we can start to prioritize an actual plan of action for ourselves, right? Modifying our schedules accordingly to connect with Allah, to connect with ourselves, understanding it, having this type of self-awareness, right? That's a really important part of this deed, being able to recognize that. And then, I even put here, just kind of put a sample plan together. I was like, hey, it might be good to book some time off in the last 10 days of Ramadan, focus on worship and family, right? So that I don't have distractions from work or distractions from school or distractions from other things that are going to keep me awake. So this is just an idea that I had about how we can maybe start to putting together our own personal wellness plans. And then finally, I'll just leave you with the dua here. رَبَّنَا اغْفِرْ لَنَا وَلِإِخْوَانِنَا الَّذِينَ سَبَقُونَا بِالْإِيمَانِ وَلَا تَجْعَلْ فِي قُلُوبِنَا غِلًّا لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا رَبَّنَا إِنَّكَ رَءُوفٌ رَحِيمٌ. O our Lord, forgive us and all those who have died before us in faith, and erase from our hearts any ghill, any ill feelings towards others. Indeed, you are most merciful and forgiving. Jazakumullahu khairan. I know we are at time, but my understanding was there were some questions. So again, if for those that have had the forbearance and the sabr to last this long, inshallah, we'll be on. Feel free to drop off if you need to, and we'll maybe take a few of the questions and see what we've got.
Okay, so we had 3 questions. I'll just give them to you all if you want, and we can figure it out however you want to do. So the first question was about the 70 excuses.
Yeah.
So there's someone hadn't really heard that term before. So if you can explain what that means and what it's referring to. And the second question was, if you were to only pick one disease of the heart, or if you were to pick the best one to work on, that would draw you closer to God and really see a change, is there one that you can really pick and say, this is like the one that's like the one.
Got it. Okay. So let me take the first question first, which is the 70 excuses. I did gloss over that. Allahu alam, I don't remember if there's a hadith. I know it's definitely a saying of the scholars, but I don't remember if it stems from a hadith. So don't quote me on that. But essentially, it's when you find a fault in your brother, you should make 70 excuses for them. Now, what does that mean? That means that somebody's harmed me today, right? Somebody had I got on a phone call and they just totally dissed me or totally said something that was really, really offensive to me. The idea is that I go back and I look at, instead of lashing back out at them, I make an excuse for them. I say, you know what? They were having a bad day, maybe because they didn't get enough sleep last night, or they didn't eat their suhoor, or they didn't do whatever, right? And the scholar said, you do that not to take a person off the hook, but so that you don't let that anger build inside of you as the course of the day progresses, or as the course of that time progresses. So you make an excuse for them. You say, okay, this is probably where they're coming from. So in other words, I don't take it personally because there must be some situation on their end that I don't know about. And the reason they said 70 excuses is because it's really hard to get to 70 excuses, man. I mean, after you get to like 4 or 5, you're like, okay, that's enough. Like, you can't just keep the idea of 70 here is it's such a big number that you just keep giving an excuse to them. Sheikh Muhammad Sharif, he once said that, when you're, Allahu Alam, he was quoting Uthman Danfodio. Allahu Alam, I don't remember if that's the case, Sheikh Uthman Danfodio, rahmatullahi. But anyways, he said, when you run out of 70, you give them 70 more, right? Like, the idea is that you don't actually just stop giving them excuses, but you're trying to find a way for them for you not to be upset with them about what it is that they've done or that they've said. So that's kind of the idea here. Same thing, actually, if you see somebody who's apparently, who's sinning in some way, right? Did you give them an excuse, say, maybe I saw something that wasn't correct, as opposed to just going out and posting it on Facebook saying, hey, so-and-so was all over, was doing this or that, right? So the idea is you go and try and make an excuse, verify the truth before you go out there and kind of, either harbor something in your heart or go and blast it out to others. I hope that helps answer that question. The second one was, what was it again? Picking the disease. All right, good question. So the true answer to that question is whatever afflicts you most. I mean, my disease the disease that I struggle with the most is not going to be the same one that you struggle with, right? They're going to be different because we're different human beings with different experiences and different areas that we have to address. So again, this is what being real with ourselves is all about. Is, hey, my issue may be miserly. I may just be a stingy person. That might be my issue. Or I might be a greedy person. That might be, or I might be arrogant, or I might be envious, or I have to be real with myself about what is it that I am really struggling with, and that's what I need to start working on. Okay. Now, you're not going to boil the ocean. You're not going to do it all overnight. There's a struggle here, and there's a system and a place that we're going to have to try and work on and chip away at day after day, hour after hour, inshallah. That being said, my goal for next week, inshallah, is to discuss what some of the scholars call the root of the diseases, right? So scholars are actually not in agreement, by the way. They don't come back and say, this is the one root. There's a number of them. I pointed at 2 of them today. Hubb al-riyasa, love of leadership. Hubb al-dunya, love of this world. Others have said envy. Others have said ghafla, which is one we're going to, inshallah, I think, spend time on next week. Heedlessness, right? So there's different root causes. All of that is important to know. But again, for you as an individual, it's important to address what really afflicts you. Right? It may not be envy. It may not be, love of this world. It may not be those things, right? They may have a role to play, but that might not be what I'm struggling with. It could be anger. And how do I begin to really take steps to address that anger? And I should have caveated this up front, guys. This was not meant to be an anger management class, and I think you saw that, right? Like, there's actual therapies and things like that that you can attend for those people that have real problems. But I wanted to address it from a spiritual perspective. Sometimes even having a mind shift of understanding our ideals versus our realities can have a profound impact on us. Anything else? No? That was it? There was one question that I got via text, so and I'll address it. It's a tough one to address, so I'm not sure if there's an adequate way of addressing it. But what do you do in a situation where a person is being bullied, and should they practice forbearance, right? And this goes a little bit to what we talked about last week with sabr, right? Sabr, being patient or patiently persevering is not about sitting down and accepting it. It's about actively working to change your condition while being dignified in doing so. In other words, you're not going off on somebody else. You're not completely off the rails in how you're treating them, but you are working to actively change that situation. I do not want any of us here to put ourselves or our family, our children, our loved ones, our community members in a situation where we are being belittled by others, right? And then say, okay, well, now I have to be forbearing because this person is ridiculing me, or this person is bullying me, or this person. That's not the situation here. That's not what we should be, that's not what we should be advocating, and that's not in any way prophetic. The Prophet ﷺ, if we look at his example, it's one where he actively worked to change those conditions, but he stood by his principles. He didn't change what he did. He didn't stop praying just because people didn't want him to pray anymore because they found it offensive. They may find it offensive. He was doing what was right by God. They were ridiculing him and calling him names. He didn't stoop to their level. You know, it's amazing, subhanAllah, the way he was able to see goodness in even the worst of situations. The Quraysh would call him mudhammam, which basically was like, you know, kind of like the belittled one, or the insignificant one, right? Instead of Muhammad, they were trying to make a play on words with his name, and his response was, "Hey guys, listen to that. They're offending some guy named Muhammad, not Muhammad." Like, he didn't take it on himself. He could have said, "Oh, they're offending me." No. He's like, they're talking about somebody else. They're not even talking about me, right? There was a group of youth that were making fun of the adhan. About 10 of them, they said, that were making fun of a person giving the adhan. And the Prophet ﷺ, he actually went to one of them and he said, "Hey, can you come here?" And they were like, they're kind of shouting, you know, obviously they're making fun of the adhan. Now, if you see the guy who's running the Muslims coming up to you, you get kind of scared. And he's like, "I want to talk to this person here." The guy's like, "Why?" And he's like, "Because the way you were doing making fun of the adhan, you have a beautiful voice. You have a beautiful voice. And I would love for you to learn the adhan properly." And this young kid, he was a kid, he was like he was probably a teenager, right? Come and he learned the adhan from the Prophet ﷺ and accepted Islam. How amazing is that? These are people trying to make fun of him. And he's saying, he's hearing the music. You know, he's literally hearing the choir in his head. He's like, man, those guys, they may be making fun of it, but that one dude's got a really nice voice. I'm gonna go single him out. Hey, come here. You know what? Let me do that again. I want to hear this beauty of that. SubhanAllah. Lots of lesson in that for us. Again, in a lot of cases, you know, there's Adam Center, mashallah, has these sessions on bullying and how it stems oftentimes from personal issues or personal things that people are experiencing. That's how it's manifest. So oftentimes, you know, I'm all in favor of obviously making excuses, but we should not be accepting a situation that is harmful for ourselves or our loved ones in any ways. We should be working to actively try and change that. So there is a difference there. This man who came in and insulted the Prophet by talking to him about money and debts, you know, it was a personal assault on him that he pushed off. Said, "No, I'm not going to let that get the better of me," right? But he also said, "Go and give the man his money. Rectify the situation. If we owe him money, give it to him," right? He didn't just leave it at, "All right, well, you know, the guy's making fun of me. Sorry about that." So just to be clear on that. Any other questions come up? No? MashaAllah, I want to just congratulate all of you for lasting a full hour and a half plus with the session. I hope, inshallah ta'ala, it was beneficial for everybody here. Again, these sessions are actually, I know you don't see it, but they're more impactful for me than I think for any of you that are on the call. As I go through the books and as I go through and I start studying this, it's really helpful for me. So even if I hope inshallah there's some benefit for you, but I know for me personally, it's done a lot to help me understand a little bit more about myself and bring that type of self-awareness, which I think ultimately is going to help us down the spiritual path. So jazakumullah khairan for everyone to attend. Inshallah, we'll just ask you to make dua for myself, my family, my parents, my in-laws, my loved ones, and inshallah we'll see you next week for the next session. Actually, I think it'll be Umrah, the concluding session.
Yeah, that's actually one question I got was about if we extend it to cover all the diseases.
To cover all of them. Inshallah, you know, I did this as a primer with everyone, and as I'm going through it, I think there is a need to probably go a little bit deeper into each one of these. And again, a need for myself. I wouldn't want to just throw something together. I'd want to make sure that it's something that's deliberate and well thought out and planned, inshallah. So maybe we can work together on that and see how we can do something, you know, beneficial for everyone here, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan, everyone. I appreciate you lasting. We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the best in this world and the best in the next world and protects us from the punishment of the fire. We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants us spouses and children that will be the comfort of our eyes and makes us leaders of the righteous. We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives us and our parents and all of the believers on the day of judgment. We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives us and all those who have died before us in faith, and that He erases from our hearts any ghill, any ill feelings towards others. Indeed, He is most merciful and forgiving. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ وَاجْعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا ربنا اغفر لنا ولوالدينا وللمؤمنين يوم يقوم الحساب ربنا اغفر لنا ولإخواننا الذين سبقونا بالإيمان ولا تجعل في قلوبنا غلا للذين آمنوا ربنا إنك رؤوف رحيم وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.